The door to the penthouse clicked shut, a sound as final as a gavel striking wood, as definitive as a coffin lid closing. It was a small sound in the vast, silent apartment, but for Kang Min-jun, it was a cataclysm. It was the end of a world. He stood frozen in the center of the cavernous living room, the city of Seoul glittering like a galaxy of fallen stars through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. None of it reached him. The light, the life, the ceaseless energy of the metropolis he commanded, it all died at the glass. Inside, there was only the suffocating echo of that single, soft click. He had not moved to stop her. His body, a weapon honed by years of discipline and violence, had failed him. His limbs were lead, his tongue a stone in his mouth. He could topple corporate giants with a single phone call, end a man's life without a second thought, but he could not conjure the words to make her stay. Don't go. The plea was a scream inside his skull, a frantic, pathetic howling that never passed his lips. Zola was gone. The scent of her, a warm and subtle mix of jasmine and the clean smell of cotton, still clung to the air, a ghost teasing him with what he had just lost. He could almost feel the phantom warmth of her hand in his, the memory of its perfect fit. He had held that hand only hours ago, believing it was his to keep. He had been a fool. He finally forced his legs to move, the motion stiff and unnatural. He walked not to the door, but to the sprawling white sofa where they had last sat together. The indentation from where she sat was still there, a shallow valley in the plush cushion. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, a weakness he hadn't permitted himself in over a decade, and traced the shape of her absence. The fabric was still warm. "I can't," she had said, her voice impossibly steady while her eyes, those deep, expressive pools of liquid amber, had shattered right in front of him. "I can't be the woman waiting at home, Min-jun, wondering if the blood on your hands is fresh. I can't love a man whose world is built on fear." He had no defense. She had spoken the truth, a truth he had lived and breathed since he was a boy, a truth he had foolishly believed his love for her could somehow sanctify or erase. He inherited a kingdom of shadows, and he had tried to drag an angel into it. He saw that now. He saw the sacrilege of it. A single tear, hot and sharp, escaped his tightly controlled composure and tracked a path down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. He let it fall, a testament to the colossal failure that echoed in the silence she had left behind. The city lights blurred, the proud towers of his empire weeping with him. He was Kang Min-jun, the dragon of Seoul, a man who had everything and nothing at all. And in the crushing emptiness of his perfect, sterile palace, he finally understood the true meaning of poverty. 3 months earlier, the world had been a different color. For Zola Adebayo, it was mostly shades of gray. The gray of concrete sidewalks she hurried along before dawn, the gray of the cheap instant noodles she ate for dinner, the gray of the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. But there were moments of vibrant, defiant color. Today, that color was white. She stood before the window of a ludicrously expensive boutique in Gangnam, a place she had no business being near. She was a textile design student on a threadbare scholarship, juggling 2 part-time jobs just to afford her share of the rent on a tiny apartment near her university. This was a different universe, a planet of impossible wealth and casual luxury. But the dress in the window was a masterpiece. It was a simple, elegant sheath dress, crafted from a heavy, textured silk that seemed to drink the light. It was the purest white, a color of stark confidence and unblemished beginnings. Zola, a connoisseur of fabric and form, could appreciate the artistry. The cut was perfect, the draping sublime. It was a dress that didn't shout, it sang. She allowed herself these small tortures, these window-shopping excursions into a life that was not hers. It was fuel for her dreams, a reminder of the world she wanted to design for, not just press her nose against. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the heavy glass door open. A cool gust of air that smelled faintly of money and expensive perfume washed over her. A bell chimed softly, announcing her intrusion. A saleswoman with a face frozen in a mask of polite disdain looked up from her phone. Her eyes swept over Zola in a single dismissive glance, taking in her worn jeans, her simple cotton t-shirt, and the scuffed but sturdy boots on her feet. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a small, tight curve of the lips that was more a judgment than a welcome. Zola ignored her. She was used to looks like that. She was a dark-skinned black woman in a society that was overwhelmingly homogenous. She was an artist, a dreamer, in a temple built for heiresses. She knew she didn't belong, but the dress called to her. She found it on a rack near the back, isolated like a piece of art. Up close, it was even more beautiful. The silk had a subtle, woven pattern like ripples on a placid lake. She reached out a hand, her fingers itching to feel the texture, to understand its weight and fall. Her fingertips had just brushed the sleeve when a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "May I help you?" It was the saleswoman. She had materialized silently beside Zola, her posture rigid. "I was just looking," Zola said, her voice soft. She let her hand drop. The woman's eyes flickered from Zola's face to her dark hand, then back to the pristine white dress. A tiny, ugly smirk played on her lips. "That collection is very delicate, and perhaps not the right color." Zola stiffened. She knew exactly what the woman meant. The unspoken words hung in the air between them, thick and poisonous. "What do you mean, not the right color?" Zola asked, her voice losing its softness, gaining a low, dangerous edge. She met the woman's gaze directly. The saleswoman, emboldened by Zola's simple clothes and foreign features, dropped the pretense of politeness. "Some colors are not flattering," she said, her tone condescending, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Dark skin can't wear white. It's too stark. It would be a waste of a beautiful dress." The words struck Zola like a slap. It was a familiar kind of ugliness, a casual racism she had encountered in a dozen small ways since moving to Seoul. But the sheer audacity of it here in this temple of supposed elegance left her momentarily breathless. Rage, hot and swift, coiled in her stomach. Her first instinct was to lash out, to unleash the torrent of furious words bubbling on her tongue, but she wouldn't give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. She lifted her chin, her eyes flashing. "Thank you for your expert opinion," she said, her voice dripping with a sarcasm so cold it could have frozen fire. "I'll be sure to remember it." She turned to leave, her heart pounding a furious rhythm against her ribs. She felt 100 pairs of invisible eyes on her, the weight of judgment heavy on her shoulders. She wanted to be small, to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here. It was in that moment as she turned that she saw him. He was standing near the entrance, a tall, imposing figure framed by the bright light of the street outside. He was dressed in a suit so exquisitely tailored it seemed to have been spun from shadow and steel. It was impossible to guess his age. He could have been 30 or 40. His face was a study in harsh, beautiful angles, with a strong jaw and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light around them. There was a faint, silvery scar that cut through one of his eyebrows, a tiny flaw in an otherwise perfect, intimidating mask. He wasn't just looking at her. He was seeing her. The world seemed to slow down, the ambient noise of the boutique fading into a dull hum. His gaze was preternaturally intense, a physical force that held her pinned in place. It wasn't a leer. It was something deeper, more elemental. It was a look of pure, unadulterated focus, as if in that single moment she was the only person in the entire world. A shiver, completely unrelated to the cold anger still coursing through her, traced a path down her spine. For a heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. Kang Min-jun felt the shift in the world the moment she turned. He had been walking past the boutique, his mind on a tedious meeting about shipping logistics, when a flicker of movement inside had caught his eye. He had entered on a whim, a vague impulse he hadn't bothered to question. He had seen the entire exchange. He had watched the cheap, ugly words leave the saleswoman's mouth and had seen the proud, defiant anger flash in the woman's eyes. And then she had turned and her eyes had met his. Everything else ceased to exist. The sterile white walls of the shop, the cloying perfume, his ever-present bodyguard, Jin Woo, waiting discreetly by the door, it all vanished. There was only her. She was not the type of woman who usually caught his eye. He was used to women who were polished, perfect, and pliant. This woman was real. Her beauty wasn't in perfect symmetry or flawless makeup. It was in the fire in her amber eyes, the proud set of her jaw, the way her very presence seemed to be an act of quiet rebellion. She was a wildflower in a greenhouse of orchids, and he, in that frozen, silent moment, felt a sudden, desperate need to possess that wildflower. It was a feeling so foreign and so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. It was ownership. It was fascination. It was a punch to the chest that left him breathless. Zola broke the contact first, tearing her gaze away. The air rushed back into her lungs. The moment was broken, but the echo of it remained, a strange vibration in her bones. Flustered, embarrassed, and still furious, she pushed past him without a word and fled into the bustling street, leaving him standing in the silent, sterile boutique. Min Jun watched her go, his eyes tracking her until she was swallowed by the crowd. The world came back into focus, but it was irrevocably changed. The saleswoman was now hovering near him, her previous disdain replaced by a fawning, obsequious smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you?" she simpered, her eyes wide with avarice. She recognized power when she saw it. Min Jun turned his head slowly, and the full Arctic coldness of his gaze fell upon her. The woman's smile faltered. She took an involuntary step back, as if she had touched a live wire. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That woman who just left," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that was more menacing than any shout. "The dress she was looking at, the white one." "Yes, sir?" the saleswoman squeaked, her face paling. "I'll take it," he said. He paused, his dark eyes scanning the racks. "And every other piece in this boutique, in white." The woman stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Sir? The entire collection?" "Everything," Min Jun repeated, his voice flat and final. "Bag it all. You have 1 hour. Send the bill to the Golden Dragon Group." He turned to his lieutenant, who had entered the store and was standing silently behind him. "Jin Woo, get her details, the woman who just left. I want her name, her address, everything. Find her." "Yes, Chairman," Jin Woo said, his face impassive. Min Jun walked out of the store without a backward glance, the soft chime of the bell heralding his departure. The saleswoman was left standing amidst the racks of white clothing, her mind reeling. She had just made the biggest sale of her life, and she had the distinct, chilling feeling that she had also just made the biggest mistake of her life. Outside, Min Jun stepped into the back of a black armored sedan that had materialized at the curb. As the car pulled silently into the stream of traffic, he stared out the tinted window, but he wasn't seeing the streets of Gangnam. He was seeing a pair of fiery amber eyes. He didn't know her name. He didn't know who she was. But he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he would not rest until she was his. 2 days later, Zola was in her cramped apartment, sketching furiously in her notebook. The apartment she shared with her roommate, Soo Min, was a chaotic but cozy space, filled with art supplies, half-finished canvases, and stacks of books. It was their small sanctuary against the overwhelming scale of the city. The incident at the boutique still stung. She had tried to bury the anger, to channel it into her designs, but the humiliation lingered. She was sketching a new collection, a defiant explosion of color, using vibrant Ankara prints in bold, powerful silhouettes. It was her answer to the saleswoman's sterile, narrow-minded world of white. There was a loud knock on the door. Soo Min, who was painting her nails a fluorescent green at their tiny kitchen table, jumped. "Who could that be? We didn't order chicken." Zola shrugged, getting up to answer it. She opened the door to find 2 men in sharp, dark suits standing in the drab hallway. They looked profoundly out of place. Behind them, stacked precariously high, were dozens of large, elegant shopping bags from the very boutique she had fled. Her blood ran cold. The man in front, who had a calm, professional demeanor, gave a slight bow. He was the one she vaguely remembered standing behind the intense man at the store. "Are you Miss Zola Adebayo?" he asked, his English perfect. "Who's asking?" Zola said, her hand tightening on the doorknob. Her mind was racing. How did they find her? How did they know her name? "My name is Park Jin-woo," the man said calmly. "This is a delivery for you." "A delivery? I didn't order anything," she said, her voice sharp with suspicion. "There's been a mistake." "There is no mistake, Miss Adebayo," Jin-woo replied, his expression unreadable. "These are from my employer. A gift." Sumin had crept up behind Zola, her eyes wide as she peered at the mountain of designer bags. "A gift? From who? A secret admirer?" she whispered excitedly. Zola shot her a warning look. "I don't want it," she said firmly to Jin-woo. "Take it back." "I'm afraid that's not possible," he said, his tone still polite but with an underlying current of steel. "My employer was very specific. These are for you." "Your employer?" Zola demanded. "The man from the store?" Jin-woo simply gave another slight, non-committal bow. He and the other man began moving the bags into the tiny entryway of their apartment, a silent, efficient invasion. Zola was too stunned to stop them. In moments, their small living space was overwhelmed, a sea of pristine white bags and tissue paper. It looked like a snowstorm had hit their apartment. "This is insane," Zola whispered, staring at the sheer volume of it. "This is creepy." "Is it legal?" she asked, louder this time, her fear giving way to a new surge of anger. "How did you get my address? My name?" "My employer is a very resourceful man," Jin-woo said simply. He placed a small, embossed card on top of one of the bags. "He hopes you will enjoy the collection. He also hopes you will join him for dinner tomorrow evening. A car will be waiting for you at 7. He bowed one last time, and then he and the other man were gone, leaving Zola and Sumin standing in the midst of a fortune's worth of white clothing. Silence descended. Sumin was the first to break it. She cautiously picked up one of the smaller bags, her hands trembling. She pulled out a delicate silk camisole. "Zola," she breathed. "This is real. Who is this guy?" Zola walked over to the pile and picked up the card. It was made of heavy, expensive stock. On it, written in elegant, masculine script, was a phone number and a single initial, K. "He's a stalker, that's who he is," Zola said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. She crumpled the card in her fist. "A rich, creepy stalker." She started grabbing the bags, her movements jerky. "I'm taking it all back." "Zola, stop!" Sumin cried, grabbing her arm. "You can't just walk into a store like that with all this stuff. They won't take it back, and besides," she gestured around the room, "look at it all. He bought you the entire store." Sumin started opening more bags, her initial shock turning into giddy excitement. She pulled out the very dress Zola had admired in the window. "Oh my God, Zola! It's the dress! He bought you the dress!" She held it up against Zola. "He must have seen what happened. He saw that horrible woman and he did this for you." "He didn't do this for me," Zola snapped, her anger not diminishing. "This isn't a grand romantic gesture. It's a power play. It's a man with too much money throwing it around to get what he wants. He's trying to buy me." "So what if he is?" Sumin said, her voice dropping. "Zola, look at us. We eat ramen 4 nights a week. You work yourself to the bone. This guy, whoever he is, just spent more money on you in 5 minutes than we'll see in 5 years. Maybe you should just go to dinner." Zola stared at her friend, then at the dress. Sumin was right about their struggle. The weight of it was a constant pressure on her chest. But the idea of accepting this ostentatious display of wealth felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. She was not a damsel in distress. She was not a possession to be bought. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not going." But even as she said it, a sliver of doubt, a treacherous flicker of curiosity lodged itself in her heart. Who was this man, this mysterious K, who wielded his power with such shocking, absolute precision? Who was the man with the scar and the eyes that had seen straight into her soul? The next evening, at precisely 7 o'clock, a sleek black sedan, the same model from the day at the boutique, purred to a stop outside her apartment building. Zola watched it from her window, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was wearing her usual jeans and a faded university sweatshirt. Her bag was packed for her late shift at the library. She had told herself all day that she wouldn't go. It was wrong. It was dangerous. But she was also terrified, and her terror was mingled with a strange, compelling pull she couldn't explain. She needed to face him. She needed to tell him, to his face, that she couldn't be bought. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and walked out of the apartment, ignoring Su Min's wide, hopeful eyes. She walked down the stairs and straight to the waiting car. The driver, another man in a dark suit, got out and opened the rear door for her without a word. She slid into the plush leather interior. The car was silent, insulated from the noise of the city. It smelled of leather and something else. A faint, masculine scent that was both clean and dangerous. It was the scent of him. She was not going to dinner with him. She was going to a confrontation. She repeated this to herself like a mantra as the car pulled away from the curb, carrying her deeper into a world she knew she should have run from. The car didn't take her to a flashy, trendy restaurant. It wound its way through quiet, old-world streets until it stopped before a discreet, unmarked wooden gate. The gate slid open silently, revealing a hidden courtyard garden, a tranquil oasis in the heart of the bustling city. The driver led her through the garden to a traditional Korean house, a hanok, with elegant curved roofs and paper-screen doors. He was waiting for her inside, in a private room that looked out onto a small, meticulously raked Zen garden. He was no longer in a suit. He wore a simple black shirt and dark trousers, the casual attire somehow making him seem even more formidable. He stood as she entered, his height and presence dominating the serene space. "Miss Adebayo," he said. His voice was the same low rumble she remembered, a sound that vibrated deep in her chest. "Thank you for coming." "I'm not here for dinner," Zola said immediately, her voice coming out stronger than she expected. She remained standing near the door, her bag clutched in front of her like a shield. "I'm here to tell you to take your things back, and to leave me alone." He didn't seem surprised or offended. He simply watched her, his dark eyes intense. "My name is Kang Min-jun," he said, ignoring her demands, "and I will not be taking them back. They are yours." "I don't want them," she insisted. "I don't want your charity, or your pity, or whatever this is." "It is not charity," he said, taking a step closer. She had to fight the urge to step back. "And it is certainly not pity." "Then what is it?" she challenged. "You saw a scene in a store, so you decided to buy out the inventory? Do you have any idea how crazy that is? How terrifying that is? You had me followed. You found out where I live. I saw a woman of immense strength and pride being insulted by a fool," he stated, his voice dropping lower. "And I saw a beautiful dress that deserved to be worn by her. I corrected the situation." His directness threw her off balance. He spoke of his actions as if they were the most logical, natural things in the world. "You corrected it by spending a fortune? By invading my privacy?" "The money is irrelevant," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand that spoke of unimaginable wealth. "Your privacy, that was a necessary intrusion. I had to find you." "Why?" The word was a breath, a whisper. He was closer now, only a few feet away. She could see the faint scar above his eye more clearly, a pale line against his tanned skin. She could feel the heat radiating from him. "Because," he said, his voice soft but laced with an unnerving possessiveness, "from the moment I saw you, I have not been able to think of anything else." The confession hung in the air between them, simple, absolute, and utterly shocking. This was not a game. This was not a casual flirtation. The look in his eyes was one of deadly seriousness. It was the look of a predator that has found its prey, but also something more, a raw, aching need that she could not decipher. Her carefully constructed anger began to crumble, replaced by a profound and terrifying confusion. Her heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. "Please," he said, and the word seemed to cost him something. "Sit. Eat with me. Allow me 1 hour of your time. If, after that, you still wish for me to leave you alone, I will." She knew it was a lie. A man like this would never leave her alone unless he chose to. But she also knew she wasn't going to win this battle tonight, and a deeper, more dangerous part of her, the part that had been captivated by his gaze in the store, wanted to know more. It wanted to understand the man behind the terrifying power. Slowly, reluctantly, she gave a small nod. She walked to the table and sat down, her back ramrod straight. She had agreed to 1 hour, just 1 hour, in the dragon's den. The dinner was a revelation. He was not what she expected. He didn't brag about his wealth or his power. Instead, he asked her questions. He asked about her studies, about her designs, about her home in Nigeria. He listened with that same unnerving intensity, his full attention focused on her as if her words were the most important thing he had ever heard. He spoke little of himself, but when he did, it was in brief, revealing flashes. He talked about the suffocating weight of family expectations, of a path chosen for him before he could walk. He spoke of a loneliness so profound it had become a part of his nature. He never mentioned what he did, what the Golden Dragon Group was, but she could read between the lines. His world was one of duty, discipline, and darkness. Zola found herself, against her will, relaxing. She found herself talking, sharing parts of herself she rarely showed to anyone. She told him about her dream of fusing African and Korean aesthetics, of creating a brand that celebrated strength and color. He listened, his eyes never leaving her face, and when she spoke of her passion, she saw a flicker of something in his gaze, not just fascination, but a deep, resonant understanding. The hour stretched into 2, then 3. The anger and fear she had walked in with had been replaced by a dizzying, dangerous chemistry. The air between them was thick with unspoken things, a palpable tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. She was acutely aware of him, of the way his long fingers rested on the table, of the rare, fleeting smile that touched his lips when she said something that amused him. When he finally drove her home, insisting on driving himself in a different, less conspicuous car, the silence between them was no longer confrontational, it was charged. He walked her to the door of her building. Under the dim, buzzing fluorescent light of the entrance, he stopped. "I will see you again," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "Minjun," she started, her voice uncertain. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently tuck a stray braid behind her ear. His fingers brushed her skin, and a jolt of pure electricity shot through her. It was the barest, most fleeting of touches, but it felt more intimate than a kiss. "I know," he said softly, as if he could hear the war raging inside her. "I know." And then he was gone, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, her skin tingling where he had touched her. She went upstairs in a daze. The apartment was still full of the white bags. She walked over to the one containing the dress. She pulled it out, the heavy silk cool against her skin. She looked at the dress, then at her own reflection in the darkened window. She thought of the saleswoman's cruel words, "Dark skin can't wear white." Then she thought of Kang Min-jun's eyes and the way he looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. On a sudden impulse, she slipped out of her clothes and put on the dress. It fit as if it had been made for her. The pure white silk against her dark skin was not stark. It was breathtaking. She stared at her reflection, and for the first time, she didn't see a struggling student or a foreigner who didn't belong. She saw a strong, beautiful woman. She saw the woman Min-jun saw. And it terrified her, because in that moment, she knew she was lost. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Min Jun pursued her with a relentless, single-minded focus that was both overwhelming and intoxicating. He didn't shower her with extravagant gifts anymore. He had learned his lesson. Instead, he gave her his time. He would appear at the end of her late shift at the library, waiting to walk her home. He took her to hidden art galleries, to quiet temples in the mountains outside Seoul, to hole-in-the-wall restaurants that served the best food she had ever tasted. He showed her a side of the city and a side of himself that no one else saw. With her, he was not the cold, ruthless chairman of the Golden Dragon Group. He was just Min Jun. He was gentle, surprisingly funny in a dry, self-deprecating way, and deeply attentive. He remembered every little thing she told him. He would bring her a specific type of tea she had once mentioned she liked, or a rare book on West African textiles he had somehow sourced. Zola found her defenses melting away, piece by piece. She tried to hold on to her wariness, her principles. She knew this couldn't last. A man like him, with his vague allusions to a dangerous life, was not a man she could build a future with. She told herself this every day. But then he would smile, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his harsh features and made her heart ache, and all her resolutions would turn to dust. Her roommate, Soo-min, was living vicariously through her, alternating between giddy excitement and genuine concern. "He's like something out of a drama," she would exclaim. "The handsome, mysterious chaebol heir. But Zola, be careful. These kinds of men, their worlds are complicated." Zola knew. She felt the complications every time a black car followed them at a discreet distance. Every time Min Jun's phone would ring and his voice would drop into that cold, commanding tone that wasn't meant for her. She saw the deference and fear in the eyes of his men, even the loyal Jin Woo. One evening, they were walking by the Han River. The mood was peaceful, comfortable. She had finally allowed herself to hold his hand, her fingers laced with his. It felt right. It felt like coming home. "I spoke to my mother today," she said quietly. "Is she well?" he asked. "She's fine. She's worried. She thinks I should be dating a nice, respectable Nigerian boy from our church back home." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "She wouldn't approve of you." "Because I am not a nice, respectable Nigerian boy?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Because you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Because I don't know what you are, Min Jun. And it scares me." He stopped walking and turned to face her. He lifted her chin with his finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. The city lights danced in his dark eyes. "What do you feel when you are with me?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "I feel—" She struggled for the words. "Safe. Seen. I feel happy. Happier than I've ever been." The confession cost her, but it was the truth. "Then that is all that matters," he said, his thumb stroking her jaw. "Nothing else matters." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss, but it was the first one that felt like a promise. It was slow and deep and full of a desperate, aching tenderness that stole her breath away. In that moment, wrapped in his arms with the river flowing beside them, she allowed herself to believe him. She allowed herself to believe that their love could exist in a vacuum, separate from the dark world that lurked at the edges of his life. It was a beautiful, foolish dream, and it was about to be shattered. The call came a week later. They were at his penthouse, the sterile palace that she had slowly started to fill with her presence, leaving a book on a side table, a scarf draped over a chair. They had cooked dinner together, a messy, laughing affair that felt so wonderfully normal it made her heart ache. His phone buzzed, a specific, urgent tone she hadn't heard before. He looked at the screen, and the warmth instantly vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "I have to take this," he said, his voice clipped. He walked out onto the balcony, closing the glass door behind him. Zola watched him, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She couldn't hear his words, but she could see his posture. He was rigid, his shoulders tight with tension. He was no longer the gentle man who had laughed with her over burnt vegetables. He was the dragon of soul, the commander, the kingpin. The phone call ended. He stood on the balcony for a long time, his back to her, staring out at the city. When he finally came back inside, his face was pale and grim. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. "There was an incident," he said, his voice tight. "A problem with a rival family. It's been handled." The euphemism hung in the air, cold and heavy. Handled. The word was clinical, devoid of emotion, but it implied a world of violence she could barely imagine. "Minjun," she said, her voice pleading, "you need to tell me. You need to tell me everything. I can't do this anymore. This not knowing. What is the Golden Dragon Group? What is it you do?" He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a terrible conflict. He was at a precipice. He could lie, he could obfuscate, he could protect her with pretty words, or he could tell her the truth and risk losing her forever. He sank down onto the sofa, his shoulders slumping. He looked tired, older than she had ever seen him. "The Golden Dragon Group was started by my grandfather," he began, his voice low and devoid of inflection. "On the surface, we are a logistics and investment firm. We have holdings in construction, shipping, private security." He paused and took a deep breath. "Beneath that, we are what people call a syndicate, a gang. My grandfather built his empire on illegal gambling, loan sharking, extortion. My father expanded it, and now it is mine." The words fell into the quiet room like stones. Zola felt the air leave her lungs. She had suspected, of course. She wasn't naive. But to hear it said so plainly, so bluntly, it was different. "So the money, the cars, this apartment, it's from 100 years of crime," he finished for her, his voice raw with self-loathing. "It's the profit from other people's misery." "Yes." He looked at her, his eyes begging for an understanding he didn't deserve. "This was my inheritance, Zola. I was raised for this, trained for this since I was a child. I never had a choice." "There's always a choice," she whispered, the words feeling hollow even to her. "Is there?" he asked, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "My uncle, Kang Tae-hwan, he sits on my board. He represents the old ways. If I show a moment of weakness, if I try to change things, he would have me removed, permanently. The only way to survive in this world is to be more ruthless than your enemies." He stood up and walked towards her. He looked broken, stripped bare of all his power and confidence. He was just a man, trapped in a cage of his own making. "I never wanted to bring you into this," he said, his voice cracking. "I tried to keep it separate. I thought I could have you, my one beautiful, clean thing, and keep you away from the filth, but I was wrong. It's a part of me. The darkness is in my blood." He reached for her, but she flinched, taking a step back. The small movement was like a physical blow to him. His face crumpled. "Zola." He breathed her name like a prayer. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. The two images of him were at war in her mind. The gentle lover who brought her tea and held her hand, and the ruthless kingpin whose empire was built on violence and fear. She couldn't reconcile them. She couldn't love one without accepting the other. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. It was the same phrase she would say when she finally left, the words that would haunt him for months. "I can't be the woman waiting at home, Minjun, wondering if the blood on your hands is fresh. I can't love a man whose world is built on fear." She saw the hope die in his eyes, extinguished as completely as a snuffed-out candle. The silence that followed was a living thing, a suffocating presence that filled the room. "I need to go," she whispered. She turned and walked towards the door, each step an agony. She didn't grab her things. She just walked. She could feel his gaze on her back, a burning, desperate weight. But he didn't call out. He didn't try to stop her. He gave her the one thing she had asked for, the one thing that would destroy him. He let her go. She stepped out of the penthouse and into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind her, a sound as final as a gavel striking wood. And in the elevator, as it descended from the heavens of his wealth back down to the real world, Zola Adebayo finally let herself break. The weeks that followed Zola's departure were a descent into a private hell for Kang Min-jun. The penthouse, once a sterile palace, now felt like a tomb. Her ghost was everywhere. He saw her in the empty space on the sofa. He smelled her jasmine scent on a pillow she had used. He heard the echo of her laughter in the crushing silence. He had ordered his staff to remove every trace of her, but it was useless. She was imprinted on the very air he breathed. He threw himself into his work with a renewed, terrifying ruthlessness. The brief period of softness she had brought into his life was over. The dragon of soul was back, colder and more merciless than ever before. He dismantled the rival family that had caused the incident with a brutal efficiency that shocked even his most hardened captains. He expanded his territory, his decisions sharp, intuitive, and utterly devoid of mercy. He was earning more money, consolidating more power than ever before, and he had never been more miserable. His uncle, Chairman Kang Tai-hwan, was pleased. "I was worried about you, my boy," the older man said during a board meeting, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "That little foreign distraction, it was making you soft. It is good to see you have your focus back." Min-jun looked at his uncle across the polished mahogany table, and for the first time, he didn't see a mentor or a family member. He saw a vulture feeding on the rot of their legacy. He saw the embodiment of the very darkness that had driven Zola away. A cold, hard knot of hatred solidified in his chest. His only human connection was with Jin Woo, but even that was strained. Jin Woo watched his boss, his friend, spiral into a cold, functional despair. He followed the orders, he carried out the grim tasks, but the impassive mask he wore was beginning to crack. One night, after a particularly brutal negotiation that ended with Min-jun making a man weep for his life, Jin-woo found him standing on the balcony of the penthouse, drinking straight from a bottle of expensive whiskey. "The city is beautiful tonight, Chairman," Jin-woo said quietly, coming to stand beside him. Min-jun didn't answer. He just stared out at the glittering expanse of lights, his kingdom of shadows. "Is this worth it?" Jin-woo asked, the question bold, bordering on insubordinate. Min-jun finally turned to look at him, his eyes bloodshot and empty. "What did you say?" "This," Jin-woo said, gesturing to the city, to the penthouse, to the empire. "All of this. Is it worth it? Losing her?" The question struck Min-jun with the force of a physical blow. He had forbidden anyone from speaking her name, but Jin-woo had dared. Rage flared in Min-jun's chest, hot and immediate. He grabbed the front of Jin-woo's suit, slamming him against the glass wall of the balcony. The bottle of whiskey slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. "Do not," Min-jun snarled, his face inches from Jin-woo's, "ever speak her name again." Jin-woo did not flinch. He met his boss's furious gaze without fear. "Why?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Because it hurts to hear it? Because it reminds you of what you gave up? I have served you for 10 years, Min-jun. I have seen you face down assassins and traitors without blinking. But I have never seen you as weak as you are right now. You are a king in a castle of ghosts. You are miserable, and you are letting the best thing that ever happened to you slip away because you are too afraid to change." The truth in Jin-woo's words was more painful than any physical attack. Min-jun's grip loosened. He staggered back, the fight draining out of him, leaving him hollow and shaking. He leaned against the railing, the cold night air doing nothing to cool the fire of shame and grief in his gut. Jin-woo was right. He was a coward. He had let Zola go because he believed he was irredeemable. He had accepted the darkness as his fate. But what if it wasn't? What if there was a choice? The question she had asked him echoed in his mind. There's always a choice. Meanwhile, Zola's life had returned to its previous shades of gray, but now they were darker, tinged with a constant, aching sense of loss. She went to her classes, she worked her jobs, she ate her instant noodles. She did everything she was supposed to do, but the color had been drained from her world. Soul, The city that had once felt so full of promise now felt empty and hostile. Every tall, well-dressed man she saw on the street made her heart leap into her throat. Every black sedan that passed made her stop and stare. He was a phantom limb, an ache in a part of her that was no longer there. "You did the right thing," Sumin told her, trying to be supportive. "You have to protect yourself. His world is too dangerous." "I know," Zola would say, but the words felt like a lie. Had she protected herself, or had she just run away from the only real happiness she had ever known? She called her mother in Nigeria, desperate for comfort. "You see," her mother said, her voice crackling over the long-distance line. "I told you, these wealthy men, they are trouble. They are not our kind. You come home, Zola. You find a good man here." Zola ended the call feeling more alone than ever. Her mother didn't understand. No one understood. Minjun wasn't just a wealthy man. He was the man who had seen her, truly seen her in a way no one else ever had. He was the man who had made her feel beautiful and powerful. He was the man she had fallen irrevocably in love with. One rainy afternoon, she was huddled in a small cafe near her university trying to study, but the words on the page were a blur. All she could see was his face. She missed him. The thought was a physical pain, a sharp, twisting pang in her chest. She missed his rare smiles, his intense gaze, the feeling of his hand in hers. She missed the safety and the fire of his love. She pulled out her sketchbook, but instead of her usual fashion designs, she began to draw his face from memory. The strong jaw, the dark, lonely eyes, the faint scar above his brow. She drew him over and over, trying to capture the man she knew, the man hidden beneath the layers of power and darkness. She looked at the drawings, her heart aching. She had left him because of his world. But what if instead of running from it, she had stayed and helped him fight it? The thought was terrifying, audacious, but it planted a seed of doubt in the certainty of her decision. Had she been principled, or had she been a coward? Back in his penthouse, Minjun stood before the window, looking down at the city that had been his birthright and his prison. Jinwoo's words echoed in his mind. "You are too afraid to change." He had lived his entire life by a code of ruthless survival. Change was weakness. Change was death. But living without Zola, this, too, was a kind of death. A slow hollowing out of the soul until nothing was left but a shell of power. He made a decision. It was the most dangerous, reckless decision of his life. He was going to burn his kingdom to the ground, and from the ashes he would build a new one that she could live in. He called a meeting, not with his board, but with his most loyal captains, the men who had been with him for years, and he called Jinwoo. They gathered in a secure warehouse, the air thick with tension and suspicion. Minjun stood before them, not as their chairman, but as their leader. "The Golden Dragon Group is going to change," he announced, his voice ringing with a newfound unshakable resolve. "We are going legitimate, all of it." A stunned silence fell over the room. The men looked at each other, their faces a mixture of disbelief and alarm. "We will begin by divesting from all illicit enterprises," Minjun continued, his voice cutting through their shock. "The gambling dens, the loan sharking operations, the protection rackets. We sell them off. We cut them loose. We will use the capital to expand our legitimate businesses. Construction, logistics, technology. We will become a corporation. A real one." One of the older captains, a man loyal to his uncle, finally spoke up. "Chairman, with respect, that's insane. That's our foundation. It's suicide. The other families will see it as weakness. They'll carve us up." "Let them try," Minjun said, his eyes flashing with a cold fire that silenced the captain immediately. "We will be smaller for a time. We will be vulnerable. But we will be clean. This is not a debate. This is the new way. Anyone who does not agree with this path can leave now. But if you stay and you work against me, I will destroy you myself." He looked around the room, meeting each man's eye. He saw fear, he saw doubt, but in some, including Jinwoo, he saw a glimmer of hope. a chance at a different kind of life. The war began that day. It was not a war fought with guns in the streets, but a war fought in boardrooms and back alleys, with money, information, and brutal strategic force. His uncle, Tae Hwan, was furious. He saw Min Jun's move as a betrayal of their entire legacy. He began to conspire against him, rallying the old guard, trying to force Min Jun out. Min Jun was prepared. He worked tirelessly day and night, with Jin Woo always at his side. He was dismantling a criminal empire that had taken 3 generations to build. It was a bloody, treacherous process. He made enemies on all sides, but for the first time in his life, he was fighting for something more than just survival. He was fighting for a future. He was fighting for her. Months passed. It was the hardest, most dangerous period of his life. But slowly, impossibly, things began to shift. The most toxic parts of his business were excised. New, legitimate ventures were taking root. He was still a powerful man, but the nature of his power was changing. One crisp autumn afternoon, 6 months after Zola had walked out of his life, the final battle was won. Min Jun, through a brilliant and ruthless series of corporate maneuvers, had completely ousted his uncle and the old guard, securing sole control of the newly restructured and now mostly legal K-Dragon Corporation. He stood in his office, the new headquarters of his new company. It was smaller than his old office, less ostentatious, but it was clean. He looked out the window, not at the sprawling city but towards the university district. He was tired. He was scarred from the battle. But he was free. "It's done," Jin Woo said, entering the office. He looked at Min Jun, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "You did it?" "We did it," Min Jun corrected him. He clapped a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Thank you, Jin Woo." "What now?" Jin Woo asked. Min Jun's gaze was fixed on the horizon. "Now," he said, his voice soft, "I go and get her back." He didn't send a car. He didn't send an envoy. He drove himself in a simple, unremarkable car. He found her working her shift at the small cafe she had told him about months ago. He walked in, the small bell above the door chiming softly. She was at the counter, her back to him, wiping it down. She wore a simple apron over her clothes. Her hair was tied up. She looked tired, but she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Zola," he said. She froze. Her hand stopped moving. Slowly, she turned around. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in a silent gasp. She stared at him as if he were an apparition. He looked different. The haunted, empty look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. He looked like a man who had been through a war and won. "Min Jun," she breathed. He walked towards her, stopping at the counter that separated them. He didn't care who was watching. "I did it," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I changed it. The Golden Dragon Group is gone. It's a legitimate company now. The rest, the darkness, I cut it out. It was hard. And it's not perfect yet, but I'm on the path. I'm building something clean, something that is worthy of you." Tears welled in her eyes as she listened. She saw the truth of his words in his face, in the exhaustion and the hope that warred in his expression. "I am not that man anymore, Zola," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am not the man you left. I did it for you. I would have torn down the world for you." He took a shaky breath. "Please, give me a second chance. Let me show you." She didn't answer with words. She untied her apron, dropped it on the counter, and walked around to where he stood. She looked up at him, her amber eyes searching his. She saw the man she had fallen in love with, but he was no longer a prisoner. He was a man redeemed. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs stroking his tired skin. "You came back," she whispered. "I was never gone," he answered, his voice cracking. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle, tender kiss. It was a desperate, hungry collision of mouths and souls. It was 6 months of pain and longing and misery poured into a single, searing moment. It was the frantic kiss of two halves of a soul finding each other again after being torn apart. It was forgiveness. It was homecoming. It was a promise of 1,000 tomorrows, all of them filled with light. 1 year later, Zola stood in the center of a bright, airy studio, her studio. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating bolts of vibrant fabric and sketches pinned to the walls. Her first collection, a bold fusion of Nigerian Ankara prints and Korean design, was debuting at Seoul Fashion Week. K-Dragon Corporation was her primary investor. The bell on the door chimed, and Min Jun walked in. He was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, looking more relaxed and happy than she had ever seen him. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. They looked at their reflections in the large mirror on the wall. "It's beautiful," he said, his eyes on her designs. "Everything you do is beautiful." She leaned back against him, her heart full. The path had not been easy. There were still shadows from his past, threats they had to navigate, but they faced them together. He had built a new world for them, and she had filled it with color and life. "Remember that day in the boutique?" she asked softly. "The woman who told me dark skin couldn't wear white?" He tensed slightly at the memory. "I remember." Zola smiled and turned in his arms to face him. "The centerpiece of my collection," she said, her eyes sparkling, "is a wedding gown, the purest white silk you have ever seen, and I'm modeling it myself." A slow, breathtaking smile spread across Min Jun's face. He leaned down and kissed her, a long, sweet kiss full of love and the promise of a future that was brighter than they had ever dared to dream. He had once been a king of shadows, but she had taught him how to live in the sun. In a world that tried to tell her what she couldn't be, he had given her the power to become everything she was meant to be. And in a world that had trapped him in darkness, she had been the love that led him into the light. Together, they were not just a kingpin and a resilient heart. They were a testament to the fact that even the deepest shadows could be vanquished by a love brave enough to demand a new dawn. This story teaches us that true strength isn't about the power you wield over others, but the courage to change yourself for the better. It shows that love isn't just about accepting someone for who they are, but inspiring them to become the best version of themselves. It's a reminder that no one should be defined by the prejudices of others or the darkness of their past, because everyone has the capacity for redemption and the right to build a brighter future. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. We work hard to create stories that are not only entertaining, but also carry meaningful messages about personal growth and the transformative power of love. Please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel for more stories like this, and sharing this video with someone who might enjoy it. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these narratives to life. Now we'd love to hear from you. What did you think of the moment Min Jun decided to dismantle his entire empire for Zola? Was it a foolish risk or the ultimate act of love? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And finally, for our next story, who would you like to see find their own love story? A. Jin Woo, the loyal second-in-command who deserves his own happiness. B. Soo Min, the supportive best friend who is ready for her own dramatic romance. Vote in the comments, and we'll see you in the next story.